By the way, this was the 100th episode that originally came out in 2 parts in May of 2022. The Wizard of Oz is owned by Warner Brothers. All copyright goes to them. Please support the original release and streaming services. Hello, I'm Henry R. Mockingbird, your host with the mustache.
Hi, I'm Gary.
And you know what, everybody? I've reached a milestone. You know what that means? I guess not if you have not been counting. It's my 100th review! Yay! And for this milestone, I am going to review a film that is very near and dear to my heart. The Wizard of Oz. The film is about a little girl named Dorothy Gale whose house ends up in a tornado. After a while, Dorothy lands in the marvelous land of Oz. Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, tells Dorothy that her house landed on the Wicked Witch of the East. The Munchkins, who are slaves to the Wicked Witch of the East, celebrate with much rejoicing. Only for her sister, the Wicked Witch of the West, comes by to pick up her sister's slippers, only for her sister's ruby slippers to magically appear on Dorothy's feet. After a threat from Glinda, we get this iconic line.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog too.
Glinda tells Dorothy that if she wants to get home, she has to follow the yellow brick road to the wizard in Emerald City. On her way to the wizard, she meets a Scarecrow in need of a brain, a Tin Man in need of a heart, and a very cowardly lion. When they get to the Emerald City, the wizard says they'll grant their wishes on one request: if they kill the Wicked Witch of the West. After going through the haunted forest, the witch's flying monkeys capture Dorothy. Dorothy's dog, Toto, manages to escape the witch to go get help. Toto manages to get help and leads our 3 supporting characters to Dorothy. They manage to finally find the witch's castle and disguise themselves as Winkle guards to get in. After they find Dorothy, and they almost escape if it weren't for the fact that the witch traps them. So they're pretty much gone to creek without a paddle. Or to quote the lion,
Trapped like mice, rats.
a chase scene follows, and where the Wicked Witch of the West and the Winkle Guards chase our main protagonists all throughout the castle. It keeps going until they have them cornered against a wall. And so they are pretty much screwed. And the witch takes this opportunity to set the Scarecrow on fire, leading to this.
You cursed brat! Look what you've done! I'm melting! Melting! Oh, what a world! What a world! Who would have thought a good little girl like you could destroy my beautiful wickedness? Ah, the mouse! The mouse! I'm going!
After the witch melts, the Winkle guards are very grateful, so they go back to the wizard, only for the wizard to turn out to be a fraud, or in the words of the Scarecrow, a humbug.
You humbug!
The wizard gives the Scarecrow a diploma, the Tin Man a ticking heart, and the Lion a medal. And he tends to take Dorothy home in his hot air balloon, only for Dorothy to be left behind. Glinda comes by to send Dorothy home. Dorothy makes her tearful goodbyes, and Glinda tells Dorothy to click her heels 3 times and say to herself, "There's no place like home." And so she ends up back home, and the movie ends. What do I think? Well, I'll tell you. It's my absolute favorite movie of all time. I first saw the film on VHS when I was only 4 years old, while preparing for a school play at Carl Sandburg Elementary School, and I have loved the film ever since. It was the first movie I could ever remember. The year was 1938. Snow White had just came out, which proved that adaptation of children's literature could be successful. So MGM acquired the rights to The Wonderful Wizard of Oz and spent a year and a half working on it. And the movie released in 1939, and while it was a critical darling and was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, it was not financially successful, but it did manage to gain its money back due to its re-release in 1949, and did become a classic due to constant airings on television. First, there's Dorothy, who's pretty much the heart of the film. She's determined to get home to her Aunt Em and Uncle Henry, and you believe her, and you want her to get home. Now let's talk about my favorite character as a kid, the Scarecrow. Whenever he's on screen, there's a certain warmth about him. He genuinely cares for others. He's also very clever. He may have a head made of straw, but he is certainly smart. He is always hatching a plan, and he makes sure that that plan goes through. He's played by Ray Bolcher, and to his credit, he moves the way you would think a Scarecrow would move. He was very excited to be in The Wizard of Oz until he discovered that he was going to play the Tin Man. Yeah, to quote Ray Bolcher himself, "I was angry. I was really upset. I loved the thought of being the Scarecrow. and I could not imagine anybody else playing that part. And I could do the kind of steps that I wanted to do, and there was something else. I had a feeling that if I played this part, it would make a star out of me. So I got my wife, and we went down to Mr. Mayor's office, and we fought, and I finally won out. And let us take a look at some of those steps that never made it into the film. Let us look at the deleted scene, the Scarecrow dance.
I would dance and be merry, life would be a ding-a-dairy if I only had a brain. Gosh, it would be awful pleasing to reason out the reason for things I can't explain. Then perhaps I'll deserve you and be even worthy of you if I only had a brain.
And then there's the Tin Man, who really wants a heart, but what he really needs is love. And he ends up getting it through his friends. He was originally supposed to be played by Buddy Ebsen, who would later go on to greater fame as Jed Clampett in the Beverly Hillbillies. And at the time, he didn't mind switching from the Scarecrow to the Tin Man. But boy, would he regret it. They put aluminum dust in his makeup, and every time he would breathe, the aluminum dust would get caught in his lungs. And at one point, he tried to take a breath and nothing happened. They got an ambulance for him and sent him down to the hospital. As he would literally spend months recovering from his near-death experience, MGM announced that he would be replaced, with no explanations. Buddy Ebsen would later consider this the worst personal and professional disaster he ever had to endure. Taking his place was Jack Haley, who at the time was on loan from 20th Century Fox. He knew absolutely nothing about what happened to Buddy Ebsen, but to make sure the same thing that happened to him does not happen to Jack Haley, they changed his makeup from aluminum powder to aluminum paste. Now let's talk about my favorite character as an adult, the Cowardly Lion, brilliantly played by Burt Law. He is really damn funny and really lovable. He's like a plush toy come to life. He kind of reminds me of a toddler in the sense that he uses his tail as comfort. And then there's also this scene.
But what if she kills us first?
I said no!
Fun fact, the Cowardly Lion suit weighed 90 pounds and was made out of real lion hides. While Burt Law was in the costume, he could not eat anything.
He must have been sweating like Hades in that suit.
And then there's our villain, the Wicked Witch of the West. And her name pretty much says it all. She's wicked and she's from the West. And you really want to know how badass she really is? Well, let me put it like this. She has an army of flying monkeys at her disposal. She can fly on a broomstick. She can throw freaking fireballs right out of her hand. She can appear and disappear in a puff of smoke. Using a potion, she makes poppies, aka flowers, that put the characters to sleep. And despite having all this power at her fingertips, she is still hungry for more power. All she wants is those ruby slippers. She doesn't care how she has to get them, but she will definitely get them. Even if she has to kill Dorothy and her friends. MGM did not know how to adapt the witch, as she was definitely a hard character to adapt, as in the book she looked kind of silly looking. Producer Merlin Leroy wanted the character to be very slinky and seductive, in a similar vein to the Wicked Queen in Snow White. Producer Merlin Leroy cast Gail Sundegard, and boy did they glam her up to say the least. Leroy's assistant, Arthur Freed, who helped cast the film, and everyone else at MGM were frustrated by this decision, saying that bad witches are supposed to be ugly, like the old hag in Snow White. So Leroy told the makeup department to ugly Sundegard up. But when she found out about it, she quit. To quote Gail Sundegard herself, "In those days I was not about to make myself ugly. I have no regrets. Absolutely no regrets." I like to think she does regret not playing the Wicked Witch, and she just doesn't want to admit it. Taking her place was Margaret Hamilton, who would later go on to play Granny Frump in The Addams Family. Fun fact, before she became an actress, she was a school teacher.
Wow, can you imagine her being your teacher on your first day of school?
I like to remind you that you never went to school.
Oh.
And then we have our title character, the Wizard, who is a really good man, but boy is he a bad wizard. He's also very loyal to the land of Oz. But damn does he start out intimidating, as he literally scares our main characters with a floating head. In fact, he scares pretty much everyone in the land of Oz. There were a lot of casting choices for the wizard. The first one was Ed Wen, who basically said that the part was way too small. The second choice was Wallace Berry, who really wanted the role and badly. But MGM did not want to spare him during the long Oz schedule. But a top contender was W.C. Fields, which MGM was rather impressed with his role in David Copperfield. But W.C. Fields haggled with MGM, demanding a large sum of money to play such a big role. So he lost the role to Frank Morgan, or at least that's one side of the story. The other side is that he was busy working with Universal on his first film for Universal, You Can't Cheat an Honest Man. And speaking of Frank Morgan, he doesn't just play the wizard, he also plays Professor Marble, the doorman, the cabbie, and the guard. The effects were done by A. Arnold Gillespie, who also did the effects for Ben-Hur, as well as Forbidden Planet, and North by Northwest. Everyone at MGM called him Buddy. Not you. And this film was quite the mammoth-sized project, as he had to create flying monkeys, a melting witch, talking trees, fireballs, a floating house, and a floating head, and a tornado. To create the tornado, they had a 30-foot long muslin stocking attached to a car. They used a lot of dust and a lot of wind. To create the illusion of a floating house, Gillespie dropped a miniature farmhouse from the top of a soundstage. He would later film it in slow motion and would reverse the footage to make it seem as if the house was falling into the camera. I even got a chance to see the set and where they filmed all this when I went on a tour of the studio back in 2018. Man, was I lucky. The film was based on a book called The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, written by L. Frank Baum. And oh boy, does this man have a life story just as fascinating as his own work. He would constantly tell stories to his children and their friends. And one day his mother-in-law talks him into writing a book based on said stories. He had the book, but now all he needs is a title. One day he was sitting at his desk and looking through his filing cabinet, and the first words were, the first drawer was labeled A-N, which is Anne, and the second drawer was labeled O-Z, which was Oz. The first book was a great success, with 14 more books to follow. He would later move to Hollywood, where he would make a few Oz silent films. L. Frank Baum would remain in Hollywood for the rest of his days, until his tragic death in 1919. As a critic said at the time, the children of the world have lost their dearest friend. and I have 2 copies of the original book. As you can tell, this one has gotten a lot of love. To quote the guy from the trailer,
although the Wizard of Oz has captivated the children of 4 generations and fired the imaginations of those youthful adults who have never grown old, although 10 million copies of the book have reached eager hands and eager hearts, no one has dared the towering task of giving life and reality to the land of Oz and its people.
Now let's talk about the people who took on such a towering task. The film was written by Edgar Allan Wolfe, Florence Ryerson, and the man who's responsible for making the film what it is today, Noah Langley, as he was the one who changed Dorothy's slippers from silver to ruby. Yeah, in the book, Dorothy's slippers were silver, while as in the movie, they were ruby. He also made the fantasy side characters as hired hands on the Kansas farm. And he made Dorothy realize that there is no place like home. The songs were written by Harold Arlen and E.Y. Yip Herbert.
His middle name is Yup.
That's what I said. His name is Yip.
Yep.
Yeah, his name is Yip.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to stop this before the people who own the rights to Abbott and Costello's Who's On First blocks my review. Let's listen to all the songs they wrote. And yes, I do mean all the songs. We're going to start with the Munchkin songs, and we're going to end with the best song in the movie, Over the Rainbow.
It really was no miracle. What happened was just this. The wind began to switch, the house to pitch, and suddenly the hinges started to unhitch. Just then, the witch, to satisfy an itch, went flying on her broomstick, thumbing for a hitch. And oh, what happened then was rich.
The house began to pitch, and the kitchen took a stitch. In fact, the uncle hit his witch in the middle of the ditch. Well, come out of this situation, Lord, the wicked witch. And now the witch is dead. The wicked witch. And now the wicked witch is dead. Sleepy head, got your eyes out of it. The wicked witch is dead. She's gone where the rabbits go below.
We thank you very sweetly for doing it so neatly. You killed us so completely that we thank you very sweetly.
As mayor of the Munchkin City, in the county of the land of Oz, I welcome you most regally. But we've got to verify it legally to see if she is morally, ethically, spiritually, physically, positively, absolutely, undeniably, and reliably dead.
As coroner, I must cover. I thoroughly examined her, and she's not only merely dead, she's really most sincerely dead.
Munchkin,
brick road. Follow the yellow brick road.
Follow the yellow brick road.
Follow the yellow brick road.
Follow the yellow brick road.
Follow the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick road. Follow, 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 follow the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick, follow the yellow brick, follow the yellow brick road. You're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. To find the answer where the whiz, if ever a whiz there was. If ever a whiz there was, the Wizard of Oz is one because of the wonderful things he does. You're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
I could while away the hours, conferring with the flowers, consulting with the rain. And my head I'd be scratching while my thoughts were busy hatching if I only had a brain. I'd unravel every riddle for any individual in trouble or in pain.
With the thoughts you'd be thinking, you could be another Lincoln if you only had a brain.
Oh, I could tell you why the ocean's near the shore. I could think of things I never felt before, and then I'd sit and think some more. I would not be just a nubbin, my head all full of stuffing, my heart all full of pain. I would dance and be merry, life would be a ding-a-dairy if I only had a brain. When a man's an empty kettle, he should be on his mettle, and yet I'm torn apart. Just because I'm presuming that I could be kind of human if I only had a heart. I'd be tender, I'd be gentle, and awful sentimental regarding love and art. I'd be friends with the sparrows and the boy who shoots the arrows if I only had a heart.
Would show my prowess, be a lion, not a mouse, if I only had the nerve.
Oh, and a couple of tra-la-las. That's how we laugh the day away in the merry old land of Oz. Buzz, 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 chirp, 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 and a couple of la-dee-das. That's how the crickets sleep all day in the merry old land of Oz. We get up at 12 and start to work at 1. Taking out for lunch and then at 2 we're done. Jolly good fun, ha, 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 ho, 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 and a couple of tra-la-las. That's how we laugh the day away in the merry old land of Oz.
I was king of the forest. Not queen, not duke, not prince.
If you can actually believe it, the song Over the Rainbow was almost cut from the film, as MGM executives basically thought it was undignified for a star like Judy Garland to be singing in a barnyard. But thankfully, they came to their senses and brought the song back into the film. When the film stopped production, Leroy looked over the results of the first 2 weeks of footage. At the time, the director was Richard Thor. director of such films as Tarzan Escapes, Tarzan's New York Adventure, and A Date with Judy. He felt that his version of the film lacked the magic touch that the movie needed, so he was replaced by George Cukor, who was originally going to direct Gone with the Wind, but ended up directing the Philadelphia story. He was not a fan of the original design for Dorothy, as originally Dorothy was going to be blonde, which, to be fair, there was a point where Dorothy in the Oz books was blonde. Yeah, following the first book, Dorothy would often be portrayed as a blonde. George Cukor ended up giving Judy Garland an entire makeover, taking off half of her makeup and that blonde wig, and giving her pigtails, giving us the Dorothy we know today. And he would often repeat to Judy Garland, "Remember, you are just a little girl from Kansas." Leroy would make a very bold move. He asked Victor Fleming to take over the project. Now, the reason this was so shocking is because Victor Fleming is not the kind of man you would expect to direct a film like Wizard of Oz, as he was often very rough around the edges, going big game hunting and motorcycle riding with his best buddy, Clark Gable. All the same, Victor Fleming found the project to be downright irresistible. To quote himself, "I made the film because I wanted my two little girls to see a picture that searches for beauty and decency and sweetness and love in the world." There is some truth to what he says. The fact that parents, even to this day, wait until just the right time for their children to experience the same magic and wonder that they felt when they were children watching it with their parents. This film has basically become a rite of passage to an experience of the wonder and enjoyment that this film has to offer. The film was produced by Mervyn LeRoy, who is no stranger to 20th century reviews, as he was the guy who directed Gold Diggers of 1933, the very first movie I've ever reviewed. He also directed Little Caesar, starring Edward G. Robinson, as well as I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. Leroy was a huge fan of The Wizard of Oz ever since he was a little boy. Mr. Mayor was like, "Why don't you produce this movie if you're so crazy about it?" But he was like, "I want to direct this movie too." And Mr. Mayor was like, "Well, it's too big for you to do both." But he produced it, and he was very proud of it. As he should be. Well, that's pretty much all I have to say about The Wizard of Oz. And it's pretty much the end of my 100th episode. But I want to thank you, my viewers, for sticking with me for 3 years. Now, if you excuse me, we're going to have some 100th episode cake. I'm Henry R. Mockingbird, your host with the mustache, signing off. I give this film 5 stars. Write, like, and subscribe to the channel and ring bell for future uploads. If you like to make a movie request on this channel, do so in the comment section below. And feel free to check out my other shows, Modern Classics, TV Treasures, and Geek Reviews. And check out my editorials. Check me out on Vimeo.